Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Your biography is probably an interesting one. I haven't written anything down, but
Okay.
I know you pretty well.
You do?
As far as people go. Drum workshop leader, map maker,
Yes.
careers advisor,
Yes.
father, son, husband, rat runner,
Yes.
and am I missing anything?
No, I might not have put them in that order, but that's a fairly decent summary.
What would be at the top?
Husband,
Second?
father,
Third?
son.
Fourth? Grandfather in 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely. How could I forget? Not that I have forgotten.
I forgot as well.
Indeed, indeed. And it's interesting that how maybe it's relational that is perhaps first and foremost.
Yeah. What about running though? I feel like running must come.
Well, I was thinking
after it.
about my running and what I was going to say today. And one of my favourite films is Chariots of Fire. And there is a runner called Eric Liddell, whose sister had a go at him for running too much, put it bluntly. He should have been in church more. Maybe he had something different to say. And he said, not only did God make me, he made me to run fast. And when I run fast, I feel his pleasure. I may be not that fast. I'm perhaps fast-ish for my age group. But when I run, I feel God's pleasure.
Wow. And what is it? You're like in the top 250 over 60s,
No,
is it now? in park run?
Probably in about the top 500 over 60s, yes.
Wow,
About
come on.
that.
That means something, doesn't it?
Hey, I'm pretty pleased with how I'm
Not to
running.
belittle the God finds pleasure. Oh, no, you feel God's pleasure when you run.
I feel God's pleasure when I run.
And in the top 500.
Maybe. I'd have to look that up again.
Amazing. So we're having a conversation about creativity, imagination, mental health. And the primary reason I invited you upon to have this conversation is because you, in the majority of your hours during the week, are spent giving people counsel on how to find a career, a job,
A vocation.
a vocation,
A calling.
particularly once they leave school.
Indeed.
What they should study to make that happen.
Yep.
Obviously, that's a problem that we all face.
A challenge, I wouldn't like to call it a problem.
A challenge that we all face all the way through our lives.
Indeed.
Particularly now where people are not having one career all the way from the start of work to the end.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot more chopping and changing and mixing
Indeed.
up and reevaluating and did I ever like that anyway? And what do you see as the current state of people trying to find a career or job that they at first just enjoy?
Wow, that is a many-layered and varied question. I think what you point out is absolutely right. When I looked for a job/career when I first started, there was a bit of me that thought, hey, I need to find something I can do for the next 40 years. Probably now, slight over-exaggeration, some people are thinking, what can I do for the next 40 months? Maybe not quite 40 weeks, but certainly on a fairly short-term basis. Equally, we're in a world that perhaps for a long while looked at what we do, how we make things, etc. and so on. Maybe now we're looking at a world that, how do we survive in this world? How does this world survive? We look at the environmental impacts of various jobs and careers and so on and so forth. So I think it's different questions to different people, but I think it's about working alongside an individual to look at what is their calling, their vocation, their career path, and how do they approach that and explore that from a relatively uninformed place.
Would you say that at large most people tend to be uninformed?
Wow, there's a really good question, but I love, sometimes when I speak to particularly young people, I often talk, a parent can be involved sometimes. And when a parent's involved, I ask that parent, as part of a wider discussion, how many careers meetings have you actually had? How much advice have you sought over the years to inform your journey through life? And often it could be one meeting with a careers advisor back at school who sat down with them and said, you look like you could be a nurse, and off you go. So actually, people spend more time and getting more advice about where to go on holiday than they do with their vocational career path.
Gosh, that's quite something, isn't it? And especially, I guess, I guess if that must have been the case even when things like connections and government support was in place. Or
hey,
has that
look,
changed,
I think a young person is fortunate if they get maybe 40 minutes of a careers meeting. And in fact, I don't want to disrespect some of the places I work in, but, I sometimes struggle to see a student for 40 minutes. The maths teacher wants to teach them maths. The English teacher wants to teach them English. They've got exams coming up. They've got SATs coming up. They've got mocks. They've got everything else. So actually, potentially one 40-minute meeting to shape someone's future, not a lot.
And when you're having these conversations, what do you feel is more important? Mitigating potential anxieties, problems, or empowering creativity and imagination?
Empowering. I think right at the core of it is empowering people, and quite often knowledge is power. Quite often encouragement is power. Quite often information is power, etc. and so on. So I definitely look at empowering. That is not to say that some students, some young people, some people come to me, come to our service with a high degree of concern, anxiety, etc. And one can't just immediately blast through into the empowering without understanding the concerns and mitigation, which you called it, as part of that discussion.
Because in a previous discussion I was just having a bit earlier today, we were talking about how safety is the bedrock of creative risk taking, let's call it.
Yes.
So I guess part of any conversation you have is going to involve both inherently, isn't it? Because unless someone's got a stable, safe, informed foundation, you can take all the risks that you like, but if you've got nowhere to retreat to.
100%. And how does one understand that in what is sometimes only a few minutes of exploration before you start saying, right, where do you want to go? What A-levels do you want to take? Which college do you want to go to? There's and now and again I can be discussing that and then realise I've walked right into thin ice. Right onto their thin ice, and they're concerned that they're going to fall through that ice, and we have to perhaps retreat back to a firmer foundation and understand the situation.
What would that firm foundation be?
Again, it probably is them having a realistic understanding of what's in their rucksack. If we're going on a journey, which, that's a sort of word one can use within careers and vocations and so forth. It can be deemed as a bit of a journey. What have they got equipment-wise in their rucksack to start this journey out? Have they got a map? Have they got information? Have they got instructions? Have they got the right footwear? Have they got the right equipment, tools, and so on and so forth? And that, obviously, that's metaphors. That's not just literally, but you understand that. And so, classic example, a student comes to me, I want to be a bricklayer. And a route into bricklaying is often an apprenticeship. I immediately then start talking about that, but then I start saying, are you aware that you need a good standard of English and maths? And they go, I don't really go to English lessons. Oh, okay then. We then have to step back onto the firm ice to understand what is their relationship with these subjects and how they can move forward from there.
So do you feel that careers in general, for anyone this is, not just students, On the whole, do you feel like we're in a career space that is seeking to promote creativity and divergent thinking, as we might call it, the imagination? Or do you feel like it is more of a conform to what we have?
Wow.
And how do you, as someone that gives advice,
Yes.
and as someone who I know firsthand is keen on creating space for people to realise, be all that they can be, I mean, that must be quite a tension to walk along.
It absolutely is, and I think people have written books on it. People have sat down there, and so on and so forth. How do people know what they don't know if they don't know that they don't know it? A friend of mine once said that. You know, how do you know what you don't know if you don't know that you don't know it? And I think, I don't know every job career out there. I don't know every opportunity. There are careers and jobs that will exist in 5 years' time that don't exist now. There are jobs that exist now that won't exist in 5 years' time. How do I equip someone to navigate that world? So again, in the past, I was a map maker. I think you mentioned that. I was a map maker. And map and compass work was an interest in mine. I was in the Scouts as well. You forgot the Scouts. I was in the Scouts. And when you're using map and compass, a lost art now with sat-nav and everything else, when you use map and compass, you don't set the map and compass on the place you're actually going to, because often you can't see that place. What you would do is set your map and compass up, you point your compass in the right direction and realise that in the distance there is a church spire that is on the same direction as the place you're going to. So you don't walk with your compass in hand looking down at your compass, you're going to go off track. What you need to do is follow the path to that church. Then you reset your map and compass onto the next step. It could be that you find alternative paths. It might be that on your way there you find a stream, a brook, a river, a flood that you can't walk across. Then you reset your map, you reset your life and go, actually, I need to turn right here while I find a new path to walk along. So really, yes, I think I've almost gone past the question you've asked, but it is a deep question.
Yeah, I mean, it must be. I mean, even in your own life, I guess, like if you look at the variation of activity,
yes,
in terms of work, was that a pursuit of responding to your imagination more than anything else?
Wow. Okay, so I can truly say that how I ended up in the Ordnance Survey was because in the first year of sixth form, I had some vague idea of what I wanted to do when I was older. But in the first year of sixth form, I got asked a question. In fact, my geography class got asked the question, where is the headquarters of the National Mapping Agency of Great Britain? Call me a sad person, but I knew exactly where it was. I'd used maps a lot in scouting, and I'd realised that maps were made in Southampton, which is where I'm from, which is where the greatest, most creative footballer comes from, a certain man called Matt Le Tissier. Might be a bit of a reason why my son's got a particular name. Anyway, I thought to myself, hold on, somebody must have to make these maps. That must be a job, that must be a career. Now, I couldn't go home and look up on the internet what that was, because the internet did not exist. However, I did go home and I said to my dad, do you know what? I think I've figured out a job I'd quite like to do. And he said, what's that, son? And I said, work for the Ordnance Survey. Now, here's the first happenstance. Some might call it luck. I'm not sure. But my dad went, do you know what? There's a person in my office whose son works for the Ordnance Survey. There were only 4 people in Southend who worked for the Ordnance Survey, and my dad knew the mum of one of them. that's how I really ended up in the Ordnance Survey. It's a bit of a longer story. So I worked for them for 23 years.
And I guess would you have been expected that was just going to see you through until
I
retirement?
absolutely yes, absolutely yes. I saw no other. Maybe though, as part of what I was doing, about 5 years before I left, I went on a training course, and it broadened my horizons, my perspective, my circle of contacts, and so on and so forth. And part of that was enlarging my world. Part of that was I ended up working as a trade union rep. And this involved working with people, helping them, supporting them, advising them, particularly in areas of work and challenges and so on and so forth. And I thought, do you know what? I'm actually enjoying this. I'm gaining more fulfillment. I am being more creative. I'm feeling more of a creative outlet supporting them. It's the first time I've ever articulated it like that, than I was making maps, which I could argue is quite a creative job.
Yeah.
I could go into W.H. Smith's and on the shelf is some of my work. Because if you pick an Ordnance Survey map off the shelf, I can fairly certainly show you places which I actually put on the map myself. Battlesbridge bypass, for example, which took me forever. Anyway, that's another story. So it was at that moment when, wasn't quite a moment, it was more of a process where I thought, do you know what? I think there's something different out there. I just don't know what it is. So I began that voyage of exploration, and that's another story. I got some careers advice. I actually paid, even back then, I think it was over £100. This was over 20 years ago. I paid, I think, the best part of £100 to go and get some careers advice. I didn't know I was going to become a careers advisor, but something inside me thought, I need some careers advice.
That's a bit meta, isn't it? A careers advisor advising to become a careers advisor.
And so... Yes, I look back. I didn't have it all nicely drawn out, etc. and so on. But I just knew there was. There's another way I've perhaps never articulated it, but I just knew there was something different. What was really interesting, I found great support from my wife. You were very young at the time, both my children very young at the time, and it wasn't the time to do a career change, humanly speaking, world speaking. But there was just something. I was very fortunate. The Ordnance Survey were looking to downsize. Part of the bigger, another meta thing where organisations didn't need so many surveyors. By then, satellites and GPS had come in. So I found that path, and it's nearly 20 years since I became a careers advisor. I've got one more year and I'll have done 20 years.
And has that scratched the creative itch?
Well, great. So I'll keep telling my son what great questions they are, and they are. Yes. What was in alongside that, and I didn't quite know how it was going to work, but I thought to myself, I don't just want to be a careers advisor. I wonder if I can do more than one job, career at one time. And around the same time, I felt I wanted to create what would I call it? It was called Different Drum. That perhaps in its title says enough. I was a drummer, and I thought, do you know what? I knew of an organisation called Psalm Drummers, which encouraged people to play drums and be creative using drums. And I thought, do you know what? I think I could do that as well. So after a bit of I'll summarise it quite succinctly, is after a while I discovered 80%, 75% careers advice, 25% drumming, broadly speaking, and so I did that, and it's only in the last 2 years that I've set down the different drum. I'm now full-time, vocationally, work-wise, a careers advisor.
So say I am in a situation, not that I am particularly in this situation, but this is where a bit of a gentle role play, shall we call it? Well,
okay.
I'm not sure if I like that. We're going to pretend.
Okay.
Say I'm in the situation where I'm maybe 17, 18 years old.
Okay.
So maybe a bit older than some of the people they see.
Indeed.
On a frequent basis. And I get bored very easily. But I enjoy thinking and processing, and I enjoy taking on board a lot of information at any one time.
Indeed.
But I need downtime as well, otherwise I'm going to get angry and frustrated. And I came to a session with my careers advisor at I guess it might be late A levels at that point. What are you going to do?
Okay. In summary, I would first ask, what do you want out of this meeting? So this is your meeting. If you like, we reach a contract where you say, hey, I would like to get this out of this meeting. I don't necessarily assume what you want from it.
So maybe my response in that scenario could maybe be like, I'm keen at learning something in more depth.
Okay.
And I want to find a job which it doesn't need to pay super well, but I want to be it to be interesting.
Okay. So far, we've almost covered all the things. Imagine a Venn diagram with 4 circles. I know maths was your strong subject, Matt. Or maybe not. Imagine a Venn diagram with 4 circles. I would broadly look at, what are you good at? You want to be a footballer, you're good at kicking a ball. So what are you good at? I would then look at your qualities. What do you like as a person? You've already explained what you are like as a person. You get bored quite easily. But on the other hand, you're quick at picking stuff up. So we look at what you are good at and what are your qualities. So somebody who is good at kicking a ball, but they're determined, competitive and a great team player, I'm beginning to sense you might want to be a footballer. Okay, so you're good at kicking a ball. These are your qualities. Then I look at what you're interested in. You've already said, this is the sort of thing I'm interested in. So I would take a bit of time exploring what your interests are. Finally, I would look at your values. What switches you on? Do you want a job that maybe is highly creative and you're less concerned about the fact that you need to put a meal on the table? Or are you thinking, do you know what? I want to drive a Ferrari. Fine, okay. If you want to drive that means you want a well-paid job. Then maybe we have to look at that side of things. So sometimes what is motivating you in all of this? And inside that Venn diagram of those 4 circles is a little commonplace of all 4 of those circles. And that's what we need to look at. How do they all blend together? The challenge is, both for me and perhaps even more for the person I'm giving advice to, is what is in that circle. So an example may be, somebody came to me and said, I'm passionate about dance. I explored that, and they clearly were not only passionate about dance, they could clearly prove they were good at dance. They had all the certificates and so on and so forth. It wasn't just a passion that I want to do that, but I want a different job. I want it to involve dance. So we've got the internet. So I looked it up. Careers involving dance. We found dancer. We found a dance movement psychotherapist. We found all sorts of things. And then we found a choreologist. Now, I could have, blagged my way through and said, of course I know what one of these is. Let me explain. I didn't. So we looked it up. And we discovered actually there was a job that neither she or I had ever heard of. That's really hard to give advice on something that you've never heard of. I hadn't, they hadn't. So we explored it together. So sometimes it's about a journey together. I give information, advice and guidance. So it's about guiding people. Sometimes you give them information. Sometimes it's advice. If you take this path, this might happen. If you take that path, That might happen. But there's also guidance. A guide, you would usually expect them to have done some of the journey themselves already. So
But clearly you hadn't done a journey of choreology.
I
before.
certainly hadn't done a job of choreologist, but I use that example a lot because I have to say to a person, look, I don't know everything that's out there, so I will equip you with the tools and the information. It's now over to you to do some investigating.
But I guess in a sense, just both the 4 circles,
yes,
and also the advice and knowledge,
yes,
bit. That in a sense is empowering imaginations, isn't it? Because what you're trying to do is like, look, you've got this raw mess inside. So for some people, it's like you've got chaos.
Yes.
You know, you're sitting in a place of I've got all of these disparate parts to me. You know, I like dance, but I like, going to the movies on a Friday evening.
Absolutely.
I really like have quite a pressurized family.
Yes.
I have high expectations of from them. So that's their kind of raw building blocks of it's not a career, it's not a job, but it's all there and all needs to be figured out, and it's all sat deeply within their mind. And I'm sure at that point of being a young adult in this case, like an 18-year-old, that feels chaotic. It's not just like looking chaotic. That must feel scary.
Definitely.
And these 4 circles, in a way, are a way of aiding the imagination and piecing together some of that chaos.
100%. And even if it's just, we might not even necessarily be looking at one solution or one outcome. And your ears probably burn quite regularly because I use your story countless times. I explain, one, that you actually have a portfolio life. I had a portfolio life. It's slightly less portfolio because I'm now 100% in terms of job, a careers advisor. You work 3 days a week for one organisation, 2 days a week, you do something else. It helps enrich your way, and actually probably is the right balance for yourself. So I explain that. And equally, if we look back, I go back to the time when you were looking around, and I had to be fairly brave on this. You basically took 30 seconds to decide what you wanted to do. You said, Dad, I found a course, it's called music technology, it's college, I like it, I'm interested in it, I'm good at it, I think I'm going to pass it, now can we go and have a McDonald's? And that's pretty much how we went through it. Now, if 12 years ago, you would say to me that I would be ending up talking to my dad on a podcast about creativity from that position, that's quite a leap. But actually, I agreed with you. You did like it, you were interested in it, you were good at it, and you did pass it. So you were good to your word. Okay? So I use that, and that again empowers people. That sometimes, they're coming in thinking, I have to do. There's no have to about it. Let's look at what might suit you best at the time. It could be that you end up doing a course because you like it, you're interested in it and good at it. You're not necessarily having to sign up for life to that career path. It is a step. It's that church spire on the horizon. Yeah. You can't see way over the next 10 hills. You can see the church spire, so just aim for the church spire.
So what's your advice then to maybe people who are parents? Because in a way, as much as like a younger person who's maybe at the beginning of these things trying to figure out, not only do parents have their own life and their own jobs and their own things to figure out anyway, in which case some of the circles that you've identified would probably be helpful even for them. Mm-hmm. But they're probably even more, as parents, acutely aware of the challenges of the world. So again, this spectrum here of like, of course we want our child to, self-actualize their creativity and their wonder and their imagination. But at the same time, we really don't want them being done over and them ending up, being crude, living at home until they're 40. Because they've tried to make that thing work, which was all nice and beautiful. What's the advice there? Like, and what's more, I don't know if it's right to say what's more important. Is it more important in that respect that your child loves what they do and lives at home until they're 40, or hates what they do, but at least they're not being battered around by the woes of paying rent?
Hey, and therein lies some of the, not only the challenge, but I suppose the element of responsibility there. Don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes
you didn't want me to live with you until 40.
No. I wasn't going to go down that. But what I was going to say is sometimes when I'm speaking to a young person, let's say year 11, I become aware very quickly that even though the parent isn't in the room, I'm speaking to the parent, because so much of what that young person is articulating is really what their parent has said. So, for example, this simplistically, the parent thinks they've had this discussion. At some point, they might want to be a police officer, and so they've said, "So what I've got to do." This is not me. This is what the young person said. What I've got to do is take law at A level and then go to study law at university. Then I give myself the best chance of becoming a police officer. And it's about unpacking that. Now that might be appropriate and good, maybe even best for someone, but actually, it might not be for everyone. And you did music at college. You did youth work and theology at university. How does that link up with music technology? And actually, because you've got a degree, you could go and join the police. You could, as a graduate entrant. So that, I know that's not particularly the path you want to take. But so sometimes the plan that a parent, parents, carers, other interested parties have suggested is about unpacking that. And if that is the best, then go for it. But if I'd said to you, Matt, look, you're going to need to earn a dollar at some point. Don't go and do music technology. There's absolutely no future in it. Go and do your 3 A levels. I think, in fact, you might not remember this. But I remember it very clearly. You came to me when you were choosing your GCSEs. And you said to me, Dad, I want to do double music, PE and performing arts. I pretty much could live with that. So it was your decision. But I thought, one, that's a big ask. Two, maybe acting wasn't your strongest suit, and wouldn't business be a slightly more sensible thing to take? You sadly took my advice and did business. Let's say the only subject you didn't do particularly well in at school was business. And when I was speaking to the performing arts teacher one day, when you were in year 11, he said, it's a shame Matt didn't get to do performing arts, because I could have really used him in all the technology side of things and so on and so forth. And I said to myself, I will never give careers advice to my children again. Why? Because they are my children. I am their parent. So when Megan, my daughter, your sister, came to me for careers advice, I actually said, go and speak to my colleague Darren. He'd be a much more sensible person to give you careers advice, and so it proved. So yes, even a parent at that time with nearly 10 years experience, I got it wrong.
I guess this is that really hard thing though, and rightly so, is that there is, for anyone that has a level of responsibility over someone else, there's always going to be that tension of course I want to empower your imagination. Yes. Of course I do.
Absolutely.
But there is a level of, I feel responsible for if your imagination doesn't meet reality appropriately, let's call it.
Yes, there is a disconnect there, but there equally is that I have to, when I meet with any person, they can be adult, young person, school age, I have to look at the potential best self that they could be. And now, there's the educational aspects to it. But I met with a student who self-declared that they were an incredibly high-functioning autistic student, and they were very successfully, I might add, masking that autism. And so we explored that a little bit further, and I think she was looking at wanting to do manuscript preservation as a career path. Wow, I had the most fantastic 45 minutes, probably nearer an hour. I pushed it over the line. And we looked at that, and we spoke and chat and discussed and so on and so forth. I even discovered that she was looking at some of the estate of Tony Benn, a politician that I admired, and in fact I had actually heard speak probably 25 years ago, because he was such a great orator, and there was a connection there. So yes, when you meet with these people, it's the balance between, I've got 40 minutes to endorse, encourage, and so on and so forth, but not set them up to fail. You know, and I'm not saying I get it right every time, but with experience, etc., and so on, I hope I get close.
So what's the gold dust advice then that we can, it's a big ask, isn't it? Yes. What is the most important bit of advice that anyone could give? Because I think there's this sense of, and rightly so, it's the not setting up to fail is like, to the map analogy, is like, if you just orientate yourself by something you can't see, then you're only accidentally going to get there.
Absolutely.
You're not going to get there on purpose.
No.
And that's for sure. So, but you can purposefully get somewhere that's 200 meters away.
100%.
So
yes.
It would seem to me that the appropriate advice for anyone, whether you're a parent, a student, or someone who's looking to mix up their vocation or their career, is that orientate yourself by an achievable, or even if it's just slightly out of achievable levels.
Yes.
But certainly maybe something that you can see, or at least even if you have an unachievable goal, find an achievable part of that goal. You know, if you want to, own your own coffee shop, then why not do a 10-week online course on making coffee? Definitely. An achievable thing.
Yes.
And not setting yourself up to fail at the same time.
Look, yes, that is the gold dust question. It's the light bulb moment question. And now and again, you become aware that you've turned the light bulb on for someone. And that there, in the same way as my light bulb moment all those years ago was, where is the National Mapping Agency of Great Britain based? That was my light bulb moment. I wouldn't be here now if I hadn't known the answer to that. There's a whole life story based on that one question. Maybe that should be the start of my book. Anyway, so yes, so how do I deal with a classic example? Someone wants to be a doctor of medicine. I become aware that actually they're only doing foundation science. They are going to be unable to take A-level science. The likelihood of them becoming a medical doctor is remote. So we look at other health professions, or do we look at, you could go off and maybe do something like applied science. Let's have a look at where that might lead. That could lead to a bioscience degree, and long shot, that might in the end up getting you into medicine, if by then that is still what you wanted to go on and do. Or do you go, actually, let's have a look at this and bring an element of realism to it. So if you're looking at creative careers, I hadn't quite realised just how good I had to be at drawing to be a map maker. That escaped me a little bit. I had to learn quite quickly that one, and I had a manager, I want to place on record here, that was very patient with me on that. Yes, I understood maps. I maybe didn't quite realise the requirement for great drawing skills. By the time I finished the job, I needed great skills in computing and IT, etc. So and even that had changed. So we look at it and go, okay, there's a balance here between what is realistic and what we can hope to achieve, while at the same time being aspirational and go and be the best person that you could possibly be. And yes, I walk that tightrope on a regular basis.
So just leave us with the 4 circles. What were they? What are the tools that, say you're looking for a career and you've got disparate imagination?
Absolutely.
You're wondering what on earth I should do.
Yes.
It's probably causing you a bit of anxiety.
Yes. Okay.
These 4 circles.
Okay, so we would look at those skills. It's amazing how when you put let's say a 16-year-old on the spot and say, what are your good skills? They can't even articulate that. But sometimes I go, what would your favourite teacher say were your best skills? Or what would your best friend say your best skills were? So you look at your skills. Secondly, you look at your qualities. What do you like? And again, ask a year 11, what are they like? They look at you as if, what are you asking? Again, I say to them, okay, your best friend, how would they describe you in 3 nice words? And they can articulate that. So we look at what you're good at, what qualities have you got? Then we look at your interests. Now, are these interests that you love? You love train spotting at the weekend. That's absolutely fine. Or is it that actually you want to be a train driver? But look at your interests. What is your passion, if you like, that you get enthusiastic about? And finally, there are obviously more things, but finally I look at your values. What is important to you? I work with some students who they live in a town. They've never travelled further than 10 miles from there. So actually, it's probably I'd be a bit naive to say, why don't you go and work in London? They've never been to London, and there are 16-year-olds from Southend who have never been to London. So I've got it. So their values is, what motivates them? Is it, I want to be rich? Is it, I want to be creatively fulfilled, etc. and so on. In fact, the other day, I spoke to someone like that. She goes, I want to do a job I enjoy. I said, okay, why is that? And they were evidently quoting someone else who, in fact, quoted Confucius, who said, if you do a job you enjoy, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
So that was a 16-year-old. Now, I don't think they realised it was Confucius. They probably heard a teacher or a parent say that. But no, for some people, hey, so careers, do a job I enjoy. I never have to work a day in my life. Now, there are good days and bad days in careers, but broadly speaking, I don't work a day in my life because I enjoy it so much.
Well, there you have it. So skills, qualities, interests and values.
Absolutely.
And these are a good screening process for taking the raw imagination that you might have, hopefully mitigating some anxieties.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you get that pool of ideas in place, you can begin to research or find someone to research with you.
100%.
Based upon the things
it doesn't have to be a careers advisor. This could be someone just someone that does the journey, a guide, someone that guides you. Now, or guides, it can be a series of people. It doesn't have to be one person. So, and TED Talks can help, and this and that and the other. There are books. They tend not to read books so much nowadays. No disrespect, young people, but look, all sorts of opportunities out there. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Are you going for a run tonight?
Actually, no, I'm going for a curry, but I'm going for a very long run tomorrow night.
Okay, to burn off the curry from tonight.
To burn off the curry from tonight. There has to be some advantage.
Exactly. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.